All right, it is 2 o'clock, so let's go ahead and dive in. I'm Dan St. Jacques, the marketing manager for Hoffman Innovate It. And thank you all for joining us for today's education session, Reclaim Your Water and Your Profits. We had a great response to last month's webinar on prepless washing, and we wanted to cover another topic that's been generating a lot of interest, which is water reclaim systems. We know from conversations we've had at trade shows with our customers, with other operators, with our distribution partners, there really is a growing focus on reclaim systems, especially when you look at the rising water and sewer costs. And that's why we're covering this topic today. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. We'll address all questions at the end, but feel free to submit them at any point so you don't lose your train of thought. Also, we'll be recording today's session. We'll send out the recording along with the slides in the next day or so, and this way you can share the information with your team or revisit any points later. Joining me today are Gavin Clammy, our Product Development Manager, and Shane Groff, our National Sales Director. And they'll be guiding you through the rest of today's presentation, diving into the specifics of reclaim usage, our reclaim system, and the benefits of implementing a reclaim system at your wash. For those who may not be familiar with us, Hoffman Innovated is a relatively new company, a relatively young company, but the concept of the car wash industry is nothing new to us. The Hoffman family has owned and operated car washes since 1965 in the capital region, the Albany area, and currently operates 27 tunnel locations. We have everything from express exteriors to flex service, full service, self-serve, and in-bay automatics. As wash volume increased, especially with the introduction of the unlimited model, Tom Hoffman Jr. realized really the best way to address the challenges of high volume operations was to develop our own equipment and solutions. And really, it's this hands-on approach, I think, that allows us to meet the unique demands of the industry and ensure we're offering the most effective innovations to our customer. I think what really sets us apart is that we're operators first. We test all of our innovations right here at our own washes, and that really gives us the flexibility to fine-tune our equipment before we're offering it to others. We have a great team here and a great team on the Hoffman car wash side. We really pride ourselves on being our own toughest critics, so we're ensuring that the highest quality standards are met before we go to market with products. With that said, I'll hand things over to Gavin, who will now take you through reclaim systems and some of the benefits and features of our reclaim system as well. Gavin, the floor is yours.
Sure. First of all, just reiterate, thanks for everybody joining here. So hopefully we'll all learn something together and point in the right direction on reclaim usage. So very basic fundamentals. What is reclaim water? Ultimately, treating and prepping used water within your car wash to be able to be used again somewhere else in your wash operations. So there's multiple things that go into that. We'll step through kind of the equipment, how it actually functions, but on a very fundamental level, it's recycling your used wastewater. Instead of sending it all down the sewer, we're going to reclaim some of that, send it back to the car wash. Core reasons why we're looking to reclaim water in your wash. Sustainability, obviously, that's something that's more and more on the front of everybody's minds, both in operators and your customers as well. Depending on your municipality or location, that might be a more forced objective for you. But either way, it's something that really is coming to the forefront in all car wash operations. Obviously, water usage is a huge driver in the car wash world, so trying to minimize that is better for everyone. So sustainability, using less water is really the name of the game there. Ultimately, from a business operation standpoint, we're looking to save you money. At the end of the day, this is a business. You're all running your businesses in a way to satisfy your customers, but also to maximize your own profits within that organization. And part of that is to cut down on your costs, cut down on the materials required to produce a high quality wash for your customers, and ultimately put some savings in your pocket, in your business, to be reinvested and ultimately serve your customers in a better way. And then the efficiency. For our system, it's really about providing the water when you need it, where you need it, how you need it, and making sure that it's prepped and ready to use in the most efficient way possible. So this is kind of the core way the system functions and the steps in which the water travels here through our reclaim system. So first of all is the collection process. You all have some sort of a pit system under your wash. We're going to collect that used wash water, however it's draining down there. We're going to either go around the horn here, or we're also going to have a loop here for recirculation. So part of this part of the control of reclaim and making sure that that water is ready to be used again is recirculation and keeping the water moving. Just like any place that water is collecting in the world, whether it's a stream or a swamp or a bucket of water in your backyard, stagnant water allows things to grow and ultimately becomes an odor and bacteria issue. So when our system is not producing filtered water for your wash, part of the time it will be in a recirculation mode. So there's a separate outlet that comes off the reclaim system. It does not filter the water. It simply pulls the water up from the pit and sends it outbound to be used in a recirculation loop. We generally tell people to send that down into their conveyor pit. You can use it for underbelt cleaning. You can set it up in that way. You can use it creatively to kind of wash down parts of your wash system if you need to. But ultimately, it's to get that whole water loop in your system moving and breathing. The more that happens, the more oxygen gets into the water. And that's just a very natural, easy way to control some of the odor and bacteria growth within your system. In our system, there's an idle loop where it will go through a recirculation, a rest mode, and a filter mode if the wash is not demanding reclaimed water. If you're not in that recirculation loop, you're going to go through the filtration system. So the first thing we're going to do after we pull the water out of the final pit is we're going to do a chemical treatment. That's how we are in our system controlling a lot of the stuff that's growing in it, is we're using a chemical treatment. We'll go over later some of the other alternatives to that, but we find that chemical treatment is something that car wash operators are very comfortable with. Ultimately similar to dosing any of your other products in your wash. Understanding that is something that we feel is pretty easy to understand. It allows some different chemicals to be used depending on which type of issues you're seeing in your reclaim system. But ultimately, we have a chemical treatment pump on the system, and that will go right into the stream of the reclaim. After that, you're going to go to our filtration. We use a mechanical filtration system, so a multimedia filtration. We find that to be more effective than a cyclonic or similar filtration, where we're really doing a full direct filtration of the water, which will also work regardless of the materials that are being filtered. So even neutrally buoyant materials will also be filtered out just fine in that filtration system. Once you have that dosed filtered water, you essentially have your clean, ready to use reclaim water. You can do a couple things with that. You can send it to a storage unit, a storage tank, or you can send it directly to a high pressure pump or similar. For most of our washes, we have a little bit of a mix, but for most of our washes, we send it to a 100-gallon storage tank on top of a high-pressure pump stand. And from there, we reuse it and send it out to our wash in a couple different locations. You also have the option to send it directly to a pump, but we have found that the quality of the water is so good in the reclaim that there's really no issue with holding a little bit on top of the high-pressure pump stand. Gives it a little bit of buffer as the system turns on and off, and ultimately, it's of high enough quality that there's no issue tanking that in a slight amount like that. Then you reuse it in your wash. We'll go over some applications of where you can be using reclaim, and then the system starts all over. It goes back down to the collection pits, filters back through the system, and around it goes. So the real question for some of you is maybe where would you use reclaim? Ultimately, these 6 options here are just that. They're options. So the actual places you're going to use reclaim in your system depend a lot on how you're running your business, how you're running your wash, whether or not you have a need in a certain area or not. So pretty much straightforward from the top there. Prep wash, prep gun, that initial removal of heavy debris off of the car is one way you could be using it. Friction materials, another option. Sending it to your actual friction materials, your mitters, top brushes, wraps, things of that nature, rockers, Van Hys. That's another option. For us, the largest one is that next point there, high pressure cleaning. We'll go over this also as well, but using a high pressure nozzle array to really remove that heavy debris off the cars before you get into your friction material, we feel is a very good use of the reclaimed water. Wheels and tires, obviously a lot of attention is paid to in the washes and by customers on wheels and tires. So getting as much volume and high pressure water as you can out of those wheels and tires really ensures that you're putting out a top quality product and wash for your customers. In order to do that, you need a lot of water. In order to do that efficiently and economically, reclaimed water is a great application for that. Chemical applications, this is a possibility, and some people are doing this very successfully, but this really becomes a system integration with your chemical supplier also. So if you intend to use reclaim on your chemical applications, it's just something you're going to have to really work through with your chemical supplier. Many people are doing it successfully. It just requires a conversation to understand what specific chemicals you're using from them, where you're using it, and what applications, and then what would be reclaimed, just to make sure that everything's behaving well together. You're not getting buildups of any specific chemicals that maybe you don't want lingering in your system. And ultimately, everything is just functioning together from a chemical application standpoint. And then equipment cleaning also. So again, on that recirculation, you could use that for under belt cleaning, things of that nature, but also tunnel prep and things of that nature. You could use that through prep gun or something similar for ultimately washing down tunnels and things of that nature as well. So system integration. So this gives you kind of just like a very high level view of how the system would be installed at one of your tunnels. You're going to have a reclaim system in your back room. Honestly, you can place this essentially anywhere you want. You know, we have it shown towards the exit of the tunnel, but it doesn't necessarily need to be towards the exit of the tunnel. It could be ultimately anywhere along your back room that makes sense and the plumbing works out for you. We're generally feeding from that reclaim system to a high pressure pump stand. Again, different back rooms are going to be laid out differently, but that's kind of the direction you're going to be feeding it. And then you're going to have some underground storage tanks. Those might be under your back room, under your wash. They might be external. They might be underneath the parking lot. But ultimately, you're going to feed all that drain water out of the tunnel to your first settlement tank. Generally, a lot of you are using a 3-tank system. You can go from tank 1, heavy settlement tank, tank 2, fine settlement tank, then into your clarification tank or tank 3. That's where we're going to have our pump pulling up the water. So where the least amount of settlement is present. And then obviously you're going to have an overflow from that for anything that's not reclaimed out to your water oil separator and ultimately out the sewer. And again, you can lay this out quite a number of ways depending on what your actual site is laid out like. This just gives you another view of the settlement tanks themselves. Again, kind of working backwards almost here. We have that third settlement tank. That's going to be your clarifying tank. You might have a separator in it, you might not, but that's where we're going to put our Grundfos grinder pump. This is a heavy-duty, built tough sewage grinding pump. So it is meant and designed to live in a harsh environment and produce water upstream for years to come. And previous to getting to that tank, you're going to have your settlement tank 2. Again, this is where your fine settlement is going to be done. And in this tank, the piece of equipment we provide for you is the micro bubbler. So this is, you can think of it as a giant aquarium aerator, essentially. You're going to feed an air line to that off your shop air supply. And what that's going to do is really oxygenate the water. So another way that odor is controlled is by oxygenating the water. So making sure that the water is not dying and decaying in that manner. And so we're going to suspend that bubbler in the middle of that tank, essentially, so we're not stirring up too much of that settlement that's happening in the tank and just providing the maximum amount of aeration we can to the actual reclaimed water. And then settlement tank 1 is ultimately where the reclaim is coming in or where the unused water is coming into the tunnel. And that's where you're going to go in and start the whole process from the filtration process or from the settlement. And again, just a kind of further clarification on the tanks here. Settlement tank 1, that's your initial collection. That's where everything from the wash is flowing into, gets heavy stuff out. Settlement tank 2, that's a remover of your finer particles. Also where we have the micro bubbler for aeration. And then that final tank, that's where we're really going to have pretty clarified water at that point in terms of settlement. And we're going to remove the very last fine particles from settlement, and then where our Grundfos grinder pump is. The Grundfos pump is actually supplied to you on a small stand. It's about 18 inches tall. Keeps that pump up out of the very bottom of the tank. Depending on how often you're pumping out your tanks, we just want to make sure we keep the Grundfos pump up out of any settlement that could happen. It just prevents us from having to filter all of that stuff out in the filters. Quick system comparison. Left column here is kind of our typical systems you might see in some of our competitors, and where we've taken our approach, which might be a little bit different. So process pump, a lot of the typical systems use a surface mount suction pump. We're using a submersible grinder pump. So again, our pump is not only providing the power to flow the water through the system, but it's also grinding up, chopping up anything that might be within that system. So if that's leaves, small debris, small fingers off of a wrap, foam, things of that nature, it really does an amazing job of grinding that stuff up and making sure that it's not too large of an object downstream that could cause an issue. But it's a macerating pump, so it's very strong. The only time we've seen any issues with them in terms of sucking something up that it shouldn't is a piece of rebar from when a tank was initially poured, and there was a cutting of rebar that got up into the pump. Beyond that, it's going to chop up whatever you kind of send its way. The suction pumps can have issues up top with holding in material that they shouldn't have. They often have a strainer basket as well to protect them some, so that they can just be a little bit more maintenance prone, we find. In terms of filtration systems, again, typical systems are going to use a filter basket, generally a cyclonic setup, potentially a biologic filter or a sand filter. All of those are pretty maintenance prone items, especially daily maintenance, like things on a filter basket. Cyclonics are going to have issues not filtering those neutrally buoyant particles. And for us, we went for an automatic controlled back flushing multimedia filter. So you can think of it like a giant pool sand filter on some level, but we have a controller on your HMI. You can set when it automatically back flushes. You can do that based on time of day. You can do that based on filter conditions, back pressure. We allow the operator to really tune how that filter is maintained and flushed based on your requirements for your wash. It will depend on what size water supply you have coming in. It'll depend on what type of material you're flushing off of your vehicles and getting into your filter system. But it allows a lot of flexibility for you to tune and control how that filter works. And once you have it set up, it's going to do it whenever it needs to flush. So if it's getting clogged, it's going to flush. If you want to flush it every day, it'll flush every day. You can do that in off hours. You can really tune it in. And then once it's like that, it's a pretty set it and forget it type system is what we're going for. Takes out of that daily maintenance issues that somebody needs to be in the background to take care of. For odor control, other systems might use an ozone or a UV, which can be a complicated system. There can be some danger and issues with those systems. There can be problems with those systems in terms of just their durability in a car wash application. And they're difficult for a normal operator or owner to really diagnose and get into the issues to fix them if you do have a problem. For us, we're trying to keep it simple wherever we can. So using an aeration system and a chemical dosing system. Again, somewhat akin to other dosing systems you're going to have in your tunnel for soaps and things of that nature. We just find that it's comfortable for the operator, it's consistent for the operator, and it's tunable for the operator. So ultimately, much more approachable system for you guys. And then control systems. Typical systems not going to have a lot. They might have some hand-controlled dials, but ultimately they're going to have very limited diagnostics and a very limited feedback to the customer if something's going wrong, what's going wrong, or how to control what's happening. For us, we have a nice large full-color HMI. There's a PLC controller in it controlling all the functions of the machine, and it allows that operator to come in and really set up the personal settings for your wash and to tune in the system to your particular needs. That might change throughout the year. It might change, from your warm months to your cooler months. You might be in an environment where you have pretty consistent weather. Depends on what's coming off the cars, but it allows you guys to ultimately be in the system, see how it's operating. If there is an issue with a piece of a component within it, it'll alarm. It'll let the operator know, hey, this is what's not working. This is the state I'm in. And you can dive in there and really get to work fixing the equipment. In the world of reclaim, obviously you're trying to save water, save money, but with anything, there's challenges that come along with something good. So for us, really the things we're after here are odors, water usage, and clogged nozzles. That's really what what your problems are going to be and what you're going to be tuning the system around to try to address. So I'll go over some how we might address some of those here. So for odors, big thing for us is adjustable dosing. So there's a chemical dosing pump right on the machine, another high quality Grundfos item. Ultimately, it allows you to dose the chemical based on what you're trying to control the odor of and what type of chemical you happen to be dosing with. So it's a pretty open-ended system. We do provide a solution for the chemical dosing, but if you have another chemical you want to use, that's also plausible. Our machine will accept it just fine. And it allows you to dose differently maybe during your recirculation process than you do during your filtration process. It will allow you to quickly make edits and changes. Again, you might be able to reduce your dosing in your cooler months where you're not getting as much growth in your reclaim pits. All very intuitive, all very easy, all right on the HMI, but it allows you to drive the system however you want and really optimize your savings when it comes to that stuff. Water usage. So high efficiency production. We make a standard flow and a high flow system, and ultimately allows you to make reclaim water when you need reclaim water. So we're not making it at a consistent rate so that you need to make it all day long, like maybe a small RO system, and then tank that. With a high volume system, it allows you to make the reclaim when you need it and store it in a very small storage area, or again, direct to the pump if you want to do that. And then the other challenge obviously is clogged nozzles. So what we're doing there is high performance filtration. And, I talked a couple times about the neutrally buoyant particles that maybe some of our competitors allow through. Those can be a real burden downstream in your nozzles. For us, it's all about removing that stuff as much as humanly possible. So we remove over 99% of the particles greater than 10 microns, and it allows us to use small orifice sized nozzles with very, very minimal clogging. Again, there's no point in using reclaim if you're going to clog your system where you're putting the reclaim through, and then you're not washing cars efficiently at all. So for us, we've really found that medium blend we're currently using does a great job of removing all of those particles and allows that highly filtered water through downstream so that it can be used efficiently and consistently in your wash process. And then we'll kick it over to Shane here. Shane will review, financial side of the system as well. So Shane, all yours.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Gavin, for the recap of how our system was engineered and designed to work. So as Gavin mentioned, everyone, there's several reasons we're all doing this. Environmental concerns and, of course, financial concerns. So looking at this piece of equipment, solely from the financial side of things, we've gathered some data from our washes, where, we're fortunate that we can share our water and sewer bills with ourselves within our company and share some real world data points with you. Just simple things like, calculating your water usage. We're going to look at how much water you're using per car, how many cars you're going to wash a day, and your days of operation per year. Just simple basic math, but sometimes we do have to review this. We prefer to do it both off the water meter and off our water and sewer bills. At Hoffman's, we're typically using about 50 gallons of water per car. In the Capital District, you can see there we're about 0.8 of a cent per gallon water and sewer. So it's costing us, on average, in the Capital District, about 30 cents a car for every car we wash, water and sewer combined. Now we do have some other locations not directly in the Capital District, which we'll cover in a little bit. But to break down our water usage, you can see here, we're using about 8 gallons on every car for cleaning detergents. We use about 25 gallons a car for high pressure cleaning, and that. If you've been in some of our previous webinars and pitch sessions at the shows, that high pressure cleaning is what we refer to often as our prepless model. That is in lieu of employees standing there with high pressure wands, prepping the cars as they're entering the car wash. Um, then we have our first rinses. Then we have our wax and sealers, and then of course our final rinse. And that final rinse is at our washes is our spot-free water, reverse osmosis. So you can see on that bar graph, without reclaim and with reclaim. So we're cutting it right in half because we're using 50 gallons a car, 25 of it's that high pressure cleaning, and we're currently doing that high pressure cleaning with the reclaimed filtered water that Gavin described. So now when we break that down, I'll break that down into the equipment we're using it on. So many of you might be familiar with our oscillating high pressure blasted arch. It runs 0-degree nozzles that are aerating. Most common configuration is 45 nozzles. We also have one that has 81 nozzles on it. And then we even have a couple customers that run a dual basket, which adds 9 more, so they have 90 nozzles. So you start adding those nozzles up, typically 750, 800 PSI, you're talking about a gallon a minute per nozzle. So depending on how fast you're running your conveyor, typically we're washing 3 cars a minute, so if you have 45 nozzles, right there's 15 gallons a car. We're going to break this down into an ROI scenario for you. You can see we have it broke down, water and sewer per gallon, cars per year, gallons per car, with and without reclaim. Store 1 and 2 there in the blue, that's our capital, what we refer to in the capital region. Water and sewer is quite cheap as compared to, other areas of the country, Denver, Colorado, and some other areas. But also, as compared to the next store 1 and 2, which is our Western market, water and sewer, not quite, but getting close to being twice as expensive as the Capital District. So Dan and I broke this down in there, and we said, store 1, let's just call it a slower store. For round numbers, we're just going to say that store runs 100,000 cars. Store 2, we're going to call it a high volume store, and we're going to, again, for round numbers, we're going to earmark it right around 350,000 cars a year. So you break down your math on a real cheap water and sewer cost per car. You can see a slower store saving about $20,000 annually, and the high volume stores saving $70,000 annually. Of course, you start doing this across multiple locations, like Dan said, 27 locations, the savings add up considerably. And then as that water and sewer cost per car increases, you can see how the numbers just go crazy exponentially, with that as much as $122,000 a year in savings just by cutting your water usage in half on that high volume store. So, that's a little over $10,000 a month. I'm not quite sure anybody would say, I don't need that. I think we'd all like to save about $10,000 a month. So, much like our previous webinars on going prepless and using reclaim and that, we wanted to share real world data with you right off of our P&L sheets, right off our water and sewer bills, to show how one piece of equipment, depending on the variety, standard flow or high flow, like Gavin was saying, you're ranging between a $36,000 piece of equipment up to a $46,000 piece of equipment. And I've been seeing installation costs bouncing right around $8,000. And that's considerably less than the competitors, mainly because, like Gavin pointed out, our pump is out in the pit pumping in. So we recommend just put a 6-inch chase pipe under the ground, pull your pump hose and your electric through it and your air line versus competitive systems where you're putting as many as half a dozen to one of the highest ones I've seen was 11 Schedule 80 pipes under the ground, which all have to be backfilled and compacted carefully so they don't crack. They have to come up through the concrete in your back room at specific dimensions so that they can connect to the filtration system when installed, versus our more simpler approach of, hey, let's make this thing fast and easy. Let's not make it complicated for the installers. Throw a 6-inch chase pipe in the ground. If that thing comes up 2 feet away from the piece of equipment, great. If it's 4 feet away from the piece of equipment, great. Because you're just hooking up that 2-inch pressurized line from the grinder pump. So those installation costs have only been, what I've been seeing is right around $6,000 to $8,000. So on a high flow setup where you have $46,000 piece of equipment, 6 to 8 on top of it, let's just round it up. Say you're at $55,000 on a slow store with very cheap water. You're just at a 2.5 year payback. At a high volume store with cheap water, you're paying for the piece of equipment in less than a year. And then when you get into the higher cost per car, and again, I know, the 0.014, that is still, many of you may be looking at that and saying, hey, wow, Shane, that's still cheap compared to what we pay. The prices are just all over the board, but in our direct scenario where we have washes that this is what our costs are at a slow store, 35,000, you're at an 18-month payback. At those high volume stores, which in our Western market that does have this higher cost, we do have these high volume stores. We're paying for this system in less than 6 months. So much like Gavin said, where his objective as the engineer team putting this equipment out was, once you get it set, there's no daily, weekly maintenance, but as you can see from the numbers, of course, there's daily, weekly, monthly, yearly savings. And as we move further down the deployment schedule of this piece of equipment, we've been commercially selling it now for at NRCC will be 2 years. The prototypes have been out there longer. We're finding more and more people are using our equipment in areas that we never thought they would. We took the approach of, let's use it in our high pressure so we can prep the cars. And then, we had people say, well, we're going to use it as our wet down water. We're going to use it, as in some of our chemistry in that circle that Gavin had shared of all the different possible applications you could use it for. And we have some customers moving forward they're saying, you know what, 50-50 is not good enough. We're going for 80-20. We're going to use your water in 80% of our wash process. And, I really look forward to being able to share with everybody those data points once we get it and show you that ROI. It's really exciting for us at Innovate It to be able to do that. And as Dan said, many of the questions we get is, what makes you different? What separates your equipment for this vendor over here? Sometimes it's not always what separates the equipment, although Gavin has shared clearly some advantages that our equipment has over others. But I like to always emphasize what separates us from our competition is we sit in the exact same chair as you operators. We wear the same shoes day in and day out. And Gavin and his team have worked closely with our installers and our service technicians to provide solutions that really work for a car wash operator. Give you the flexibility to tune it the way you want, which ultimately, as you see here, gives you the ability to control your destiny and your savings. So I really want to thank everybody for joining us today. NRCC in Atlantic City is our next show, and we're just over a month away from that. We're at booth 313. Gavin will be there. He's going to have this piece of equipment there again. Please come by, talk to him and the rest of the team about how this piece of equipment, along with our others, can work for your team at your wash. That's really important because I know that's a lot of what Gavin does day in and day out. Is he's bridging that gap between his engineer team and your car wash. How he can have his equipment work for you in your specific scenarios, he said earlier. So thank you guys. Gavin, I really want to thank you for that education session on your piece of equipment. Again, here you can contact us at sales@innovatedcarwash.com for an email address. Go to innovatedcarwash.com. You see all the hard work that Dan's put into it. He's got the installation manual, the instruction manual for the Reclaim in there. You can see what it takes to install it, service it, maintain it. And Dan, I'll give it back to you for a Q&A, bud.
So yeah, we'll give a few minutes now if you want to submit any questions. If you have any questions you want to pass along to these guys, and I will relay them. We'll give it a few minutes to ask. Otherwise, again, we will have a recording of this webinar. And as Shane just showed you there, the contact information for the sales team, and I'll share Shane's contact information as well. So any other additional questions you have, if you don't happen to have them right now, obviously you'll have the opportunity to ask those questions again. So if you do have something you want us to cover right now, please go ahead and submit them at the bottom. I'll give you a few minutes for that. Otherwise, thank you again for attending today.
And I'd just like to also share, not only are Zach and myself who do work with our customers and our partners available to you guys all the time, but you have the rest of our team at your fingertips too. You can call up and speak to Gavin and his team. Many of you speak to Michael, who works for Gavin, answering startup questions or anything. Not many companies out there manufacturing give you the availability to speak to the engineers who designed it and the whole product development team. So please take advantage of that, especially when you're at the trade shows. Gavin comes with us every time, helps set up the booth, and is there to speak to your team and answer your questions.
All right. Well, it looks like you guys have done such a wonderful job covering the topic that you have answered all questions before they've even been asked. So well done, you two. Again, thanks everyone for joining today. If you do have questions, obviously, you can reach out to our team, like Shane said, and we can certainly follow up with those. I will have the recording out to you in the next day or so. So another chance to share this with your team members, customers, as we said earlier. And again, if any questions come up, please do reach out to us. And hopefully we look forward to seeing you guys at NRCC in just over a month here. So thank you again for attending today. And we hope to see you all soon. Thanks again.
Thank you, guys.